Hello everyone and welcome. Just in case some of you have forgotten, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Rachel.
And we are Picture the Scene podcast, a true crime podcast aimed to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. Now, shall we address the elephant in the room, Rachel? We've been gone a while and our absence was quite sudden. Sadly, neither of us won a lottery, but sometimes life gets in the way. We have to prioritise life. So for those of you that missed us, we are sorry. We are back, but initially we won't be producing weekly, but we will produce on a semi-regular basis as and when we can. Okay, so with that, Rach, how have you been? It's been a moment, hasn't it?
And it feels good to be back, eh?
It does. It's been, 9-10 months, something like that?
Oh, too long. And I feel like my concept of time, clearly, is very different to fact. Because, obviously for the first couple of months there, I had a newborn and I still don't think I've caught up on the lack of sleep. So yeah, it is really good to be back. And, the aim is to get back to regular episodes, guys. We're just testing the waters with, fitting everything in. Life has changed quite a bit for the pair of us, work and personal responsibilities. So, hopefully you guys enjoy us being back as much as we do, and before you know it, it'll be like we'd never left.
Exactly. Softly, slowly. But it's been really nice, Rachel. We've had so many messages over the months that we've not been here, with people messaging randomly saying, hey, we really miss you. We're listening to all your episodes again. We hope you come back soon. I hope you're okay. The support that we got when we stopped, it's just been truly amazing. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and I don't think when you're in the middle of something, whether that be like the podcast or whether it be like a family holiday or like Christmas time, birthdays, I don't think you ever really truly appreciate the moment. And then like after the fact, definitely having this downtime and hearing from so many lovely people, like it's been a real wow, we have been missed. And I don't think we have really appreciated that whilst we were recording. How many of you love us and our pod? So thank you.
Definitely not. And I mean, definitely we didn't appreciate it, obviously.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
Sod you.
So, but I guess the question that's been on everyone's lips, especially mine, Rachel, is, are you ready for some true crime?
I was born ready, Andrew. Let's do this.
Okay, so before I start, I do want to give a massive shout out to Andrea, who suggested this case many months ago and did offer to help with the research. However, I know from chatting with her recently that she wasn't in a position to be able to do so when I sat down to actually write this, so I didn't want to bother her. But thank you so much for the suggestion. It's always good to cover cases that mean something to our listeners. We can't always cover them if there's not enough info, but when we can, we always will, won't we, Rach?
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea.
So, if it's safe for you to do so, I'd like you to relax. Close your eyes and picture the scene. It's the evening of Sunday the 30th of October, 1983, and we're in the quiet village of Keyworth, just south of Nottingham, which is in the East Midlands of England. Isn't a sprawling city. Now, Keyworth isn't a sprawling city where no one knows no one else. It's the kind of place where people know their neighbours, and the hum of traffic is replaced by the occasional bark of a dog or the distant sound of a television filtering through the curtained windows. But the clocks have just gone back, and with the arrival of British winter time, the sky is already dark by early evening. The weather was on its way to a low of 0 degrees Celsius that evening, with no rain. The air has that familiar chill, a damp bite that clings to your breath as it rises in faint clouds against the cold.
Like poetry, Mr. O.
The faint glow of streetlights casts long shadows across quiet village roads, flickering slightly in a breeze. Now, by the time it came to 7:50 p.m, it was most definitely dark. The moon was in its last quarter, so not giving much natural light to aid the man-made street lamps, and the stars would have been visible in the sky due to there being little light pollution in a quiet village. Now, on Normanton Lane in Keyworth lived the Aram family, Rachel. Parents, Jackie and Tony Aram, along with Mark and Colette, who were 18 and 16 respectively.
You've just dated this episode massively by announcing the children's names as Mark and Colette, because I'll be perfectly honest with you, They are not classic children's names right now, are they?
They're not, no, but who knows? They may make a comeback one day.
Absolutely, absolutely. We could have been saying a couple of very different names 10 years ago about not making the classic list now, but yeah.
Exactly. So I'd like to begin with introduce you to Colette. Now, as I said a moment ago, she was 16. She had not long since left school and was a trainee hairdresser at the nearby Salvatore salon in Keyworth. Now, Colette had been working there for several months and was well liked by her colleagues. One of them, Jan Morris, who was also a neighbour of the Aram family, would describe Colette as a very happy and lovely girl. Another colleague from the salon, Gerta Robertshaw. Now, Gerta, that's another name you don't hear often, isn't it, Rachel?
Absolutely.
Describes Colette as quiet but friendly.
You're giving all these descriptions. I'm guessing Colette is at the centre of our story today, and it's not going to be a happy story, is it?
Unfortunately not, no. But Gerta would go on to say about Colette, I had worked with Colette for several months since she started at the salon. At first, she appeared to be a very quiet but very nice girl. She became more friendly as she got to know you. I think we can all relate to that. Every job that we have out of school, Rachel, you're going to be quiet and friendly until you have that confidence and time to come out of your shell. I was like that. Was it you like that, Rachel?
Absolutely. A lot of people would say otherwise because I don't stop talking most of the time. But yeah, when you're in that kind of first job out of school, there's a period of like, you just observe, don't you? You don't speak unless you're spoken to, really quite quiet, quite shy. And especially in that profession, stand out quite obviously, won't it? But yeah, I'm guessing that after a bit of time, she gets to know the clients, gets to know her colleagues a bit better. She will be coming out of her shell and, showing them kind of a cheeky side and a bit more funny and a bit more natural. But yeah, don't blame her for being reserved in the new job.
Exactly. Now, outside of work, Colette was known to be a popular girl who was lively and enjoyed life, and she made friends easily. She wasn't really one to go out drinking or partying. Instead, she preferred to stay at home or spend time with her boyfriend. She had a love of horse riding, which she did often, and she just started up karate as a new hobby. Now, back to the day in question, October the 30th. We know it was 7:50 p.m, as that was a time that her mum, Jackie, remembers Colette saying goodbye to the family and telling them she was off to see her boyfriend, 18-year-old Russell Godfrey, who lived about a 20-minute or so walk away at Belvedere Cottage in nearby Widow Brook. Now her mum remembers, as she told her mum, the route that she'd be walking, that she'd walk up Nicker Hill, which was well lit, putting her mum's mind at ease. Now usually Russell, her boyfriend, would pick her up in his car, but on this day, his car was being serviced, so she decided to walk on that cold Sunday evening. Colette knew the route like the back of her hand, having grown up in the area and walked or been driven that route countless number of times before. After, at some point between 8 and 8:10, Colette sees some friends of hers in nearby Nicker Hill, so she stops and briefly talks to them. Now, shortly after 8:10, Russell, Colette's boyfriend, was beginning to wonder where she was. How come she hadn't arrived at home yet? It wasn't that far, and he knew she'd left some 20 minutes or so ago. These were the days before mobile phones raged, so he couldn't text her or WhatsApp her or give her a quick call. So he called her home, only for her mum to confirm, yes, she'd gone around 20 minutes or so ago, give or take.
That's going to set alarm bells ringing on both sides, isn't it?
It's most definitely. And given the time it would take to walk between the two houses and the character of Colette, Jackie, her mum, immediately knew something was wrong. So she picked up the phone and dialed emergency services 999 to speak to the police. Now, when she got through to the police, they were less concerned than Jackie was, though, and the policeman she spoke to told her not to worry. Colette would turn up and she'd probably just seen some friends or something like that. But Rachel, you're a mum now, aren't you? And if you're worrying about one or both of your daughters and someone in authority just turned round and dismissed your worry and told you not to worry, would you be able to listen? Or would you worry anyway?
Absolutely. I'm not listening to them. I'm doing my own thing. I'm knocking on a couple of doors and I'm getting a search party right away. I think mother's instinct is a thing. Um, yeah, and in this case, her boyfriend had that instinct as well because, she did stop off on Nicker Hill and chat to friends, but she still would have made it because it was a relatively short journey and it's dark and she's made plans. She's going to say, hey, how are you? Oh, by the way, I'm on my way somewhere, so can't chat. See you soon kind of situation. And she's not made it there. So a journey that's very familiar to her and only takes less than 20 minutes. So if there is something wrong, yeah, you're not going to be like, oh, okay, Mr. Policeman, you're absolutely right. I will sit at home and think that everything's rosy.
Exactly. And with it being a bit colder, she probably would have been walking a little bit quicker because you'd want to get there quicker, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I actually think as well, like, you've got a situation where, you know, you should be so she's left home. She's 10 minutes into a journey. She's seen these people that she knows. So she stops and talks. She's only got a relatively short part of her journey left. It's cold night. It's a dark night. You're going to kind of peg it after that point, aren't you? Because you've stopped your brisk walk to chat. You're going to pick up speed again. So, yeah, she absolutely would have been at a boyfriend's house, in my opinion, in a shorter amount of time.
But you are exactly right, though, what you said about being a mum. Being told not to worry didn't do anything to appease Jackie. She immediately, after hanging up with the police, called around all the neighbours and friends to see if anyone had seen Colette, along with calling all the possible hospitals that Colette could conceivably could have been taken into to see if she'd been admitted. Now, everything came back blank though, Rachel. She wasn't in any hospital, and no one had seen or heard from Colette. This only added to her parents' worry.
I was gonna say, like, on the one hand, you don't want to hear that your daughter has been in an accident, do you? But then on the other hand, hang on, no one's got sight of her. Where the hell is she?
Yeah, exactly right. And her parents instinctively knew something was wrong, and they were beside themselves because they couldn't do anything about it. Now, Tony, Colette's dad, he spent hours. He spent virtually all night driving around looking for her. Family and friends of the Arams also spent the night searching for Colette, but with no joy, Rachel.
Whoever's responsible for her going missing has struck in such a fortunate set of circumstances, haven't they? Like, to be in the right place at the right time in a sleepy town, for no one to have witnessed it and called in, a kidnapping or abduction, whatever. And also for her to have been in a relatively well-lit area, speaking to friends, and just have like 8 to 10 minutes worth of her journey left to get to her boyfriend's. That person who's abducted her has been massively in the right place at the right time, haven't they?
Yep, or they knew her anyway, one of the two.
Yeah, they knew her pattern, right? But then her pattern was that her boyfriend had usually picked her up.
Yeah,
Again,
that's true.
she's walking tonight, isn't she? So,
Yeah.
God, how often do we hear cases where it's just the perfect storm for that incident? Like, this is horrible.
But around 10:30 that evening, Rachel, just over 2 hours after Jackie had originally spoken to police and been dismissed, the police did start to take him more seriously. And this was simply due to the fact that they had multiple contacts from their family and friends who were also looking for her. So this made the police think, hang on, actually, maybe we do need to actually do something here. So the police would join them in the hunt, using police dogs as well as obviously police officers. Jackie would later recount that she just kept repeating over and over the same thing to both herself and to anyone who would listen to her. And that thing was, she's lying in a hedge somewhere. She's dead. I know it. Imagine thinking that when you don't know anything, but just like you've convinced yourself that your daughter's dead. That would be terrible, wouldn't it, Rachel?
And actually, there's a lot to be said for the power of the mind and thoughts. And in some situations, you do sit there and speak yourself off of that cliff edge and say, she'll be fine. She's going to call us. All of this will blow over. It'll be very innocent. She's popped round to a friend's house and lost track of time. If that mother is outwardly saying, we're going to find her in a ditch dead, or a hedge, sorry, that woman's already fought internally a lot of battles to come to that conclusion and say that out loud. And there's a lot to be said for mother's instinct again, when that's where her mind is going, you know.
So the night attended to early morning, Rachel, and no one had simply given up and gone to bed. People were still searching, hoping to find Colette. The following morning, Colette's brother, Mark, was out driving in his car, looking for Colette when he was driving past the side of a field, one that had been driven past already by others earlier on, when he saw blue police tape cordoning off a field on Philby Lane between Keyworth and Windermere Pool.
God.
Oh, God, indeed, Rachel.
Your heart would just sink, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. And you, I mean, selfishly, Rachel, if I was out searching for a loved one, if it was in a situation like that, you would hope you wouldn't be the one to find them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I feel like in life, when you're looking for something, that could be like a missing passport or, you know, I don't know, shoes, whatever. Like, I don't want to say a missing person because I've never had to look for a missing person, but I feel like your brain theorizes how you're going to locate it before you do. And either it gets it right and you're like, bloody hell, I just saw into the future, or you get it completely wrong and you never find the bloody thing. But I feel like if I was out searching for a missing person, I'd be playing through my head the scenario of, oh my God, where have you been? Everyone's looking for you. I would never be playing out that scenario in my head of police tape, you know, something bad's happened. Oh my God, what am I going to find when I, you know, hop the fence or the cordoned area and see it. I just feel like that's just not something you would ever play out in your head, would it be? So actually, when he would be going through those motions, that would be uncharted territory.
Yeah, you'd imagine, like, as a sibling, he'd probably be thinking something like, oh, say to her, finding her, saying, oh, you're like, you stupid girl, we've all been looking for you, where have you been, stuff like that.
Where the hell have you been?
Yeah. But when he saw the police tape, he stopped his car and without even a moment to think, he ran towards the field. The police officers on duty, they did their best to stop him, but they couldn't. They were powered simply by a duty to do their jobs. He was powered by something much bigger, his love and his concern for his little sister. The sight he saw was something he would later recount as something he could never forget and he'd wish he'd never seen. His little sister, his innocent baby little sister, in his eyes, was dead. She'd been posed in a sexually explicit position, with her blouse and bra being used to tie her hands behind her back.
Oh my God. So not only is she dead, but he's having to see her in that such a vulnerable state. That's awful.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
It's a horrible narration.
Horrible. This is vile. Like,
so it would later be discovered that she'd been raped and then strangled to death. So Mark went home. He had in his head, he had no other option but to tell his family. As he arrived home and walked down the front path of his family home, his mum saw him and she knew Rachel.
Yeah.
Even before he opened his mouth, she knew, and she let out a scream that would pierce even the coldest of hearts. A scream that in her mind never stopped, even when the actual sound may have stopped.
And again, it's that mother's instinct, right? She knew it was going to happen. And now she is subliminally getting the signals from her son that the worst has happened without him having to speak.
And the worst thing is, even though he did eventually tell her, they have to be told officially. Him saying it is not confirmation. So later on that morning, her parents would be officially told that their daughter was dead at West Bridgeford Police Station by Detective Chief Superintendent John McNaught, who would later head up the murder inquiry. Colette, who genuinely didn't have anyone who disliked her, Rachel, she'd never be able to grow old. She'd never be able to have a family and bring her kids down that family path at her parents' home to see their grandparents. That path Mark walked down to give the news to his family.
Well, Mark is destroyed for life too.
Yes.
So the parents have obviously lost their daughter. Mark's lost his sister. The friends have lost their friend. Colleagues have lost their co-worker. The community's lost someone here. Everything changes, right, from that point on.
Yeah, definitely. To say the police had no clue as to who had so brutally murdered Colette was an understatement, to say the least. It was not their fault that they couldn't find who did it, because it seemed to be a random act to take her life. One of the biggest manhunts in British history was soon underway. Hundreds of police officers were assigned to the case.
Wow.
Now, for those of you that were fans, it was the first case ever to be featured on the BBC programme Crime Watch.
Okay, nice.
So the police managed to
not nice. Sorry,
Yeah.
Just a caveat. It's not nice, but like,
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Sorry. That would have been a better word.
So the police managed to put together a timeline of what they believed had happened. They had discovered a red Fiesta that had been stolen that they believed the killer had used. The car had been stolen at 4:30 p.m. on the day of Colette's abduction and murder from a horse riding school on Mudpie Lane in nearby Lady Bay. Roughly 15 minutes later, they had evidence of the Fiesta entering the village of Keyworth. A girl had reported to them that at 6 p.m., a red Fiesta had followed her for a short while in Keyworth while she was walking alone before driving off.
Oh, so if it's the same dude, we're assuming it's a guy, they had actually been prowling for at least an hour and a half.
Yes, at least. And at 7:25 p.m., the driver of the car was seen parked up drinking some milk. 5 minutes later, at 7:30...
Sorry, drinking some milk.
Yeah, calmly
Okay.
drinking milk. So 5 minutes later, at 7:30, the same driver asked the girl for some directions. Now the same girl would see the car and the driver nearby to where he spoke to her soon afterwards. At 8 p.m, so after Colette had already left her home, the driver is seen to park the car again, walk off, and quickly return with what seems like a blade in his hand.
So he's familiar with the area? Like, has he hidden a blade? He's visiting, he's hidden a blade, and he's gone to collect it because he's found Colette walking, or he's just thought, sod it, in the next hour, I'm going to strike whoever I see.
Yeah, I think he definitely hid the blade. Now, whether it's already spotted Colette or it's already followed a couple of girls and he thought, I've got to take one soon, I don't know, but yeah. So at 8:10, so this was almost immediately after Colette had been talking to her friends, someone who lives in the area heard screams and a car speeding off at Nicker Hill. So the location and timing, it gives little doubt that it was probably Colette being abducted that the person had heard. At 9:50 p.m, so over an hour and a half later, shop CCTV would pick up the car driving from nearby Bury Lane to Selby Lane. The car would be found the following day at 10:40 p.m. And interestingly, the keys for the car, they wouldn't be found for just over a year when they were unearthed during some building work being done nearby. So the driver had, even though he dumped the car, he'd buried the keys.
This is the perfect crime for this guy.
So far, if he doesn't get caught.
Yeah, and they've been looking for him at this point, like, obviously for more than a year, because his keys get found a year later. He's not been found yet. So just to recount, the timing of taking Colette, very opportune, because she shouldn't have been walking. She'd been with friends in between the homes. So very narrow window for him to have taken her.
He literally, from what I can gather, he literally took her like a minute or two after she said goodbye to her friends.
He's then been able to rape and kill her and return to, or take her wherever he took her. I don't know how far that was from the point that he kidnapped her, and display her in the and go evaded throughout the whole thing without any 999 calls, and then speed off, leave his car somewhere, and then drop the keys in a fucking housing development or somewhere where there's going to be a skip ton of cement or something else thrown on them. How fucking lucky.
Yeah, and the fact that also you got to remember that Colette's mum phoned the police roughly about 10 minutes, a little bit less, after she'd been taken.
Yeah.
So if they would have actually acted, then who knows? But
And do you know what though? I get it, it's the police in the 80s, so they don't need an apology from us. We're a relatively small indie pod, you know, but like, I get why they haven't acted. It is considered normal behaviour in the UK for someone over the age of 16 and therefore independently able to leave the home. They've got to wait, haven't they, 24 hours before they can treat somebody as a missing person.
Unless they've
So,
got evidence otherwise, but yeah.
well, yeah, exactly. Just off the hunch of a family member saying, I don't know where my daughter is. So, like, completely understandable that they've taken a breath and gone, no, sorry, ma'am. I'm sure she's fine. There's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. In this particular instance, it's not been like poor policing, has it?
No.
But definitely, I feel like if that 999 call had been made when that scream was heard and the two would have correlated, you know, okay, we had a situation here at 10 past 8 or 5 past 8, someone calling in at 20 past 8 saying their daughter's missing. Everything could have happened a lot faster.
Possibly. I mean, it didn't have computer systems, so that could have even still been missed, couldn't it? But yeah, quite possibly.
Fair enough, yeah. You assume the technology. Yeah, no, absolutely, I understand. Okay.
But the police, they believed the man was wearing a disguise when he killed. Because the man who had been seen stealing the car, he was clean-shaven. But the witnesses who saw the driver of the car in Keyworth all said he had a beard. So because of this, the police expanded their search to all costume shops in the cities of Leicester and Nottingham to see if anyone had bought a fake beard recently. But you also got to remember it was around the time of Halloween as well.
Feel like we're dealing with somebody that's very young here. Like, he's drinking a pint of milk in his car and he's also bought a costume beard. Like, it's almost, there's an entertainment factor here, isn't there?
Quite possibly, yeah.
And I'm not for 1 minute saying that he was taking the piss, but I wonder whether his mental age was different to his physical age. Because obviously somebody that's capable of driving, overpowering a woman and, you know, committing an awful crime, you'd assume he'd be, you know, in his adult years. Might not be the first crime he's committed even, but there's an element of him being a bit young in the mind.
No, I can see what you're saying there, yeah. Or just maybe just lots and lots of planning.
That too, yeah. And simple planning, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll get a beard. Like,
I think. I mean, he could have hidden knives in several places, couldn't they? Just
yeah.
waiting in case anyone was close by. But yeah, no, I see what you're saying. And the police, they had managed to recover, well, they recovered evidence from the scene of the crime, which had DNA on it, but DNA wasn't advanced enough at the time, so they didn't analyse it because they couldn't. So at that point, it was just stored rather than actually being useful. When interviewed by the media, Detective Chief Superintendent John McNaught, who I mentioned earlier, would confirm that Colette was sexually assaulted and was found partially clothed. She confirmed that she had not been stabbed and they were not looking for a murder weapon, but he would not confirm exactly how Colette had died. He confirmed that they were working on two theories. The killer lived locally, or that he was just passing through, which, I guess, Rachel, it shows that they didn't really have a clue because it could only be one or the other of those two things.
Oh, we definitely know he's either a local or he was passing through. Okay.
Now, the Detective Chief Superintendent, he did rather alarmingly, which is in contradiction to his own words, say this to the media. I don't want to be alarmist. All people living locally should be on their guard.
Good.
Yeah. So you're going to be fearful if you hear that, aren't you?
Absolutely. And it takes you back to the likes of the Raoul Moat scenario where that whole village was on high alert on, you know, when he was on his rampage and updating his social media profile, I think, was it Twitter maybe, with his whereabouts and who he was after. And, you know, everyone was put on alert and felt, you know, unsafe to like even leave the house in broad daylight. But I feel like that kind of message, not only would it put everyone in a small village on high alert, which he's trying to say he's not trying to do, but it would have also been massively aimed at women.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we've covered it before, and it's one of my huge bugbears in police investigations when they will start telling you, well, you know, don't leave the house. Or if you do leave the house, leave in pairs and make sure that, you know, you've got a weapon or, you know, something to defend yourself and all of this. And it's like, you're making it feel like it's a woman's fault that she's just basically asking to be attacked, you know?
Yes.
When actually, and I'm assuming here, so sorry if you're going to go on and tell me that women and men felt unsafe, when actually it should be the men that are feeling like, God, I could be under the spotlight here. I should be, conscious of where I'm going, what I'm doing, and make sure that women around me feel safe. You know, such a mentality thing.
No, and it's, you know what? This is the so-called truth. This morning when I was having my cup of tea, I was scrolling on Facebook as I do, doom scrolling, and there was an advert on Facebook advertising a service where women can check the backgrounds of potential partners. And in the comments, so I went to the comment section, I saw it like 600 odd comments, so I thought this is going to be interesting. I went to the comment section, and one of them which stood out was a man who said they don't really need this because some women just love being attracted to this type of man. And I just thought, like, just the mentality of thinking, oh yeah, women like a bad boy. They don't mind being like abused or beaten up and stuff like that. And I just thought, like, this is from like a man in 2025, and he was thinking, oh, it's okay, women like that type of thing. Like,
Bet you though, he is gonna just enjoy all the clicks and the comments and the likes and the dislikes that he gets off of vibing that way, and it winds me up because there will always be somebody there to stir the pot.
yeah,
And actually, 9 times out of 10, these people that end up behaving in these manners, their initial kind of portrayal is of somebody that's very safe, secure, loving, protective. They don't unleash their, you're not allowed to go out, you can't wear that, you can't do that, you belong in here, and they don't unleash that kind of side of them for weeks or months. So fuck you and your beliefs, like whoever that dude was.
exactly. I couldn't put it better myself, Rachel. But going back to the story, because I know I've just digressed this here. But on the guard, the local people were with women, as you said, Rachel, who lived locally, fearful to go out in case they were attacked. One 24-year-old woman, a Margaret Crump, who lived locally, would say this: normally I walk down the lane to catch a bus into Nottingham when I'm going out, but now I'm taking a taxi straight from home. And another, who was spoken to while walking her grandson to school, would say this: there are no words to describe how we feel. It has badly affected everyone in this small community. So you can see there, Rachel, exactly as you said, fear had really crept into this small village. Because this was, I don't know if it was back then or now, I can't remember, but I think I read that there was like 300 houses, so 300 basically families in this village. So it's not like it's a tiny little place, and it's just, everyone's just fearful. But due to the extensive media coverage for witnesses, 2 days after the attack, the landlady of the Generous Britain pub in the nearby village of Costock contacted the police about a customer she had served in the night of Colette's murder, who had been acting suspiciously. She would recount that he had ordered a pint of orange juice, a pint of lemonade, and a ploughman's sandwich. I guess that goes back to what you were saying about, like, potentially young at mind there, because he's going to a pub and ordered orange juice, lemonade, and a cheese and ham sandwich.
Yeah, like, that's mad. A pint of, well, I wouldn't order them separately, but a pint of orange juice and lemonade is the kind of drink that I'd order my daughter on holiday if they didn't have like a Fanta. Like,
Yeah,
like that's mad. Uh,
exactly.
and a ploughman's sandwich right after you've committed murder, like, because at this point he's splayed her body, right, and
Yeah,
left her to be found,
yeah.
knowing full well that, well, he probably knew there was a manhunt underway. He's probably heard the sirens go flying around, and he's just gone to have a ploughman's sandwich. This is mad.
When he had been ordering his drinks and sandwich, she had noticed, the landlady, that he had blood on his hands and fingers, and he'd asked her where the bathroom was before coming back with clean hands. So the police immediately, remember this was 2 days later, the police
Yeah.
immediately went to the pub, and they went through the bins of the toilet of the pub, and they came across some tissue that had blood on it. So
Don't know
remember,
why the landlady had waited 2 days though to call the
I
police.
know, but How lucky is it that the bins hadn't been emptied for 2 days, though,
Lucky,
Rachel?
but also slightly disgusting. I'm just
Yes.
throwing that out there.
So remember, they couldn't DNA analyze this blood, but later DNA analysis would show that it had Colette's blood on the tissue and the DNA of an unknown person on the tissue as well. So this was definitely the killer. He'd gone for drinking a sandwich after killing her, and he hadn't even washed it up. He'd just probably gone straight from the scene of the crime and eaten.
Interesting, isn't it? But then again, it just kind of, to me, indicates massively the naivety of him just walking into a pub with bloody hands. Like, he's not giving it a second thought. That might be what catches him out.
Exactly. You're right. That's a good point. All in all, some 20,000 people were interviewed, Rachel. Some 2,200 statements were taken and 300 inquiries carried out. The detectives were able to build up a picture, because I've already outlined it before, so I'll not go over it again, of the killer's movements before the abduction and that he'd gone to the pub afterwards, but were still no closer to find out who it was. They were also seeing if there was any links to the recent killings of 15-year-old Linda Mann and Caroline Osborne, who had been killed not too far away and not so long before Colette. But they couldn't find any concrete links. Some 18 days after the murder, the police received a letter, Rachel. Now, this letter was all in capital letters. It was on plain paper, written with a browny reddish mapping pen, and the S's in the letter had been replaced with exclamation marks, and in it outlined details of the crime. Now, this made the police believe it was sent from the killer because it contained information about the theft of the car that hadn't been made public, and that it also said in the letter that he'd been watching the girls at the horse riding school, because that's where their car was stolen from the bushes prior to stealing the car, and it outlined where exactly he stole it from and where he found the keys. So the police were fairly certain as you can get that this was the killer who had sent the letter.
Yeah, and again, just a huge amount of tells there that could have quite easily identified him. Yeah, the naivety of him, it's just coming out.
It also stated the letter, and I'm going to quote from the letter here: "Masks are common around Halloween. No one knows what I look like. This is why you have not got me. I go soon, and then you will never get me." So just a confidence that he's never going to get caught.
Yeah, like the broken English as well is again, is he going to travel somewhere? Is he, from the UK? I go soon. Is he just visiting? Is he off away again? I don't know.
Almost a year or so later, after the murder, as I said before, the murder was the first crime to appear on a brand new BBC programme called Crime Watch. Now, while they had over 400 contacts after the appeal, the police were able to say that they eliminated over 1,500 potential suspects from the investigation, but they were still no closer to actually finding out who did it. So, as you alluded to earlier, Rachel, the months turned into years, and it looked like the killer was right. He'd never be caught, leaving him free and Colette's family living in anguish, never finding justice. Some 21 years after the murder, it was featured again on the 20th anniversary edition of Crime Watch in 2004, but it led to no new leads. It really did feel like to the police the killer would never be caught. 4 years later, in 2008, advances in technology meant the evidence could be examined again, but this time with DNA analysis, and this time the police were able to put together a profile of the killer. The police then, therefore, put out a fresh appeal for members of the public to tell them who they thought had killed Colette, so they could mouth swab them and rule them out or find the killer. So this shows pure desperation from the police, doesn't it? Because they're basically saying, tell us who you think killed her, and we'll check them for DNA to find out if it's true or not.
Also great that they kept the case on, in the active pile, because I'm sure, again, small country, village-esque type situation, just easy to park it, isn't it? And file it away. It's not garnering probably much attention other than, the fact that it was the first case ever featured on Crime Watch would have been quite a spotlight on it. Ordinarily, it wouldn't have had any time in a local newspaper, would it? So, no, really good police work that it was kept updated.
That's right, actually. And they did actually, from that fresh appeal, they received over 100 calls from the public obviously saying over 100 men who could have killed her, but none of them, so they did go out and test them, but none of them got a match or got them any closer to the killer. So by now, however, like I said, they had a DNA profile in a database, and they also had a computer database in the first place, unlike in 1983, so the police didn't give up hope. So later on that year, in June of 2008, a man was arrested for driving offences. Now, as was standard by now, it wasn't standard in 1983, but by now, anyone who gets arrested in the UK is automatically has a DNA and fingerprints taken. And now, would you believe it, Rachel? Some 25 years later, the police, by pure luck, had an almost identical DNA match of the killer. But as soon as they got excited, their hopes were dashed because they knew the man they had arrested, John Paul Hutchinson. They knew he couldn't be the killer, Rachel. And you know why?
I'm going to say he wasn't old enough, because I know that name, John Paul, was like a bit more of a 90s and noughties trend. But I'm going to say, yeah, he wasn't old enough to have been alive and committing crimes in 83.
You're exactly right, because he was only 20 years old at the time of his arrest. So he was born in 1988. So he wasn't even born when Colette was murdered. And they didn't, unfortunately, find a time machine on him. So he definitely couldn't have killed Colette. But as everyone's probably guessing by now, it did, however, give him a breakthrough. They knew that while John Paul couldn't have been a killer, it had to be someone who was closely related to him. So in April 2009, following year, John Paul's father, Paul Hutchinson, who was by now 50, he would have been 25 when the murder took place. So
He was called John Paul.
No, he's called Paul.
Sorry.
So they just added a John at the beginning, obviously to make it sound fancy. Yeah. So he was 25 when the murder took place. So he was still relatively young. He was arrested. So, and you'd think, Rachel, they've got DNA evidence. So you'd just confess, wouldn't you? You'd think, okay, I've been caught.
And actually, how many years? 25 odd years.
Yeah, 25 years, yeah.
Freedom. It's time to hold my hands up and, put everyone out of their misery.
But he didn't confess, Rachel. In fact, he said he was innocent, and it would have had to have been his brother, Gerard, who must have killed Colette.
He threw his brother under a bus.
Yeah, or maybe Gerard did do it. But by now, Rachel, Gerard was dead.
No, even worse.
That's a big coincidence, isn't it? So they couldn't take a DNA sample from him. The police did, however, contact the hospital, and they were able to locate a blood sample that Gerard had taken at the hospital, obviously before he died. And from that sample, they were able to rule out that it wasn't a match to the DNA taken from the scene of the crime or from the tissue at the pub.
In your face, Paul.
Exactly.
Well done, police.
So Paul Hutchinson was arrested and placed on remand until his trial. Now, at a pre-trial hearing on the 21st of December 2009, Paul changed his plea from not guilty to guilty.
Well,
thus this negated the need for a trial. He would claim, however, that he had lost most of his memory from that day, that it all felt somewhat of a dream to him, and he couldn't recount what had happened. So just as an aside, Rachel, he's basically saying he did it in a dream state. He don't know what happened, but he knows he killed a girl. But if that was true, how would he be able to have written that letter to the police 3 weeks later, taunting them?
Yeah, and also the calculated measures that he took to hide himself away, like after the fact. He threw the keys in the quarry, or I can't remember exactly where he said he chucked his keys, but, he's taken steps to evade the police, hasn't he? And also, can I just add, upon being arrested, he's thrown his brother under a bus. He's not like, you'd imagine that he'd have just acted completely innocent and been like, I don't know what you're talking about. It can't have been me. But he's gone, oh no, my brother committed that crime. Like, almost too quickly for me to think that he's not been concocting that idea for the last 25 years.
Yeah, exactly. But the judge, when sentencing Paul, would say that it was a truly horrendous attack, and I'm going to quote the judge here. The terror and degradation that this poor girl must have suffered at the hands of a stranger in her last few moments are unimaginable. It's clear from the evidence before the court that you are a compulsive liar and a fantasist. You have lived your life with your wife and children who were completely ignorant of who you were. Hutchinson would be sentenced to life, Rachel, with a minimum term of 25 years.
Damn straight, although, like, it's nothing in comparison to what he did to that poor family. And I feel like there must have been an element of him assuming over the years, especially with the exposure on national television, that he'd be caught one day. He must have been a bit panicked by the idea that one day...
Especially that DNA. I imagine because remember it was the same year when they said that the DNA profile that his son got arrested. So I imagine he might have even been thinking, oh crap, they've got DNA on me now.
Would he have known that the tissue, was that featured in the crime watch, the tissue from the pub?
Yes, it was. It was it. Not
So,
in the, and the newspapers at the time as well, yeah.
So he'd have been well aware that it was a waiting game. Absolutely. You just got to hope that he had a shitty quality of life filled with panic.
And you've also got to think, though, probably when that happened, he'd concocted this story about, I'll just blame it on my dead brother because we've got the same DNA.
Joke of a human being.
So it came out that Hutchinson had actually been spoken to in the original investigation, but the police because he lived locally, but the police just didn't suspect him, and they didn't have, because they didn't have the DNA profile back then. So all they could do was speak to the local men, and if someone said, no, I was at home or whatever, then what are they going to do?
What joke?
Now, I've already gone over the timeline of what happened, so I'm not going to repeat that. But at the time, the man was at his highest. Hutchinson evaded any further looks into him by shaving his head to make it look like he had cancer, and he went away for a bit, telling his family and friends he was going away for treatment, only coming back a few months later.
Imagine putting everyone through that as well. Like, I didn't think he could get any lower, but you managed to he's stooped the lowest of blows there.
So it sounds to me like he's taunted the police, saying he's going to go away, which is where he's gone with his shaved head and his fake cancer story. And yet he's saying that he couldn't remember anything.
What a horrible man.
Yeah. And his family as well. Don't forget, like, his family, I mean, he wouldn't have children at that time, but his wife, she'd have been beside herself, thinking, my husband's got cancer and he's just gone away for treatment and I can't contact him.
You're absolutely correct. And, like, that poor wife, then 25 years later, realising that not only was the cancer a lie, but that he'd been capable of doing that, and she'd slept in the same bed as him for 25 years.
Yeah.
Would be, like, awful, absolutely awful. And these are the forgotten victims in these situations. Obviously, Colette is our number one, like, top of the tree in terms of, our thoughts and our respects and all of our, like, sympathy goes to the victim, to her. But the forgotten victims in these situations, the families that the perpetrator has lied to and deceived for years and years and years. And in some situations, they know, don't they, the wives, they know what their husband's capable of, or their partner, and they just put a mask over it. And in my eyes, that's no better than the person that's committing the crime. But in these situations where you literally do not have a clue, it must be awful.
I'm just thinking, like, after he'd been to the pub, he probably just went home to his wife. Not even like nothing happened.
Yep. And like I say, then he concocts a plan where he's going to shave his head and tell everyone he's got cancer. Like, oh yeah, that's just what I'm going to do. See you later. Not a care in the world.
Exactly. So Jackie, Colette's mum, would recount that the murder had destroyed her life. She'd lost her job. Her marriage had broken down. She'd lost her home. She'd had a breakdown. And eventually she left the country to get away from it all. She moved to Greece, and in time she got remarried. She would say that while it was a relief that Colette's killer had been brought to justice, they wanted to know why he killed her, why he picked her. Hutchinson, however, as he claimed to not remember anything, would never disclose that information. Jackie would go on to say, I don't feel like a life sentence is enough. He's had 27 years of his life. We have already served a life sentence, and now we're going to serve a second, but he's just about to serve his first. Which is fair enough, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely fair enough. And again, can't imagine what the pain that she's been through, reliving the whole thing and not having those answers because he never went to trial.
Now, in October of 2010, Hutchinson would be found dead in it. He would die from a suicide overdose.
Wow. Coward's way out, hey. And like, I appreciate that is not my approach on suicides in general. But in this particular case, he's died. There's no prolonged suffering for him the way that there was for Colette. He's been able to take his own life and make that decision, and it's just not fair.
Less than a year served in prison. So in the inquest, it was reported that after his sentencing, he was getting more and more depressed over time. His daughter would report that he had written to her to ask his wife, who was by now his ex-wife, because obviously she divorced him as soon as he got arrested, to visit him. Now his ex-wife refused, and a day later he would be dead. Jackie would later go on to say this after Hutchinson's death: "We are never ever going to get closure because we never got answers and we never will. He never showed any more remorse and he took the coward's way out." I guess exactly what you've just said there, Rachel.
Yeah.
So I looked into those two women, Rachel, that Colette's murder was originally linked to. It will later be discovered that Linda Mann, who was killed by Colin Pitchfork, who we all know who he is, and the murder of Caroline Osborne was also solved. But that's really a fascinating case. So if I can find enough information out about it, I'll cover it soon. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that now. But what do you think, Rachel? Is it likely that someone who killed in such a brutal fashion would have done it just once? I've really got my doubts about that.
Absolutely. And I feel like he's died with a number of demons, and probably, and maybe even the thought that it might get uncovered what he's been capable of. So, he's taken his own life before any of that comes out. It's just how often do we say it? It's just a really tragic case, Andrea. I think I've been quite vocal in this one, maybe because it's our first back, but really unnecessary, really brutal, really horrible case.
So do you have any other comments on this? And also, after you've had those, how was it like being back?
Lovely being back. Obviously, I tread carefully saying that because it's a brutal case that we've just rolled out of talking about, but obviously, all things aside with that case, really lovely to be back. And I've missed this.
So shall I wrap this one up then?
Yes, let's do.
So this has been Season 4, Episode 20, simply called Colette Aram. Now picture this: your husband of over 30 years, your father, your neighbour, the nice man who always said hello to you. What dark secrets are hiding behind his smile? So with that one for you to think about, thank you all from me.
And thanks from me.
And we'll speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon.